No end to the Russian hostilities in sight right now. 43 days and counting of this war raging on. Ukraine has now warned residents, particularly of eastern parts, to evacuate Kharkiv, Luhansk as well as Donetsk immediately or risk death. Russia has been on a relentless bombing spree, intensifying attacks in the country's southern and eastern parts. Luhansk governor has warned that Russia is building up troops for an offensive in the coming 3 to 4 days. He also claimed that Russian forces are continuing to attack the city of Popasna with rocket launchers and aircraft, due to which evacuation of civilians has been hindered. Meanwhile, Russia has been further isolated globally over the massacre of Bucha. UNGA on Thursday, that's today, will hold a vote to expel Russia from the Human Rights Council. This comes days after Zelenskyy spoke at the UN Security Council and demanded Russia's expulsion. Russia, meanwhile, has referred to the massacre at Bucha as orchestrated, attempted to derail peace talks.
В пути увеличивать он должен быть подтвержден решением Совета Федерации в случае.
And let's get you all the details of how Russia has been intensifying its attacks.
Caliber cruise missiles lift off from a small Russian Navy ship in the Black Sea, aimed at 7 different targets in southern Ukraine. A Russian Su-35 air superiority fighter taking off and conducting a strike mission on an undisclosed target inside Ukraine. A Russian anti-air system launching and hitting what is claimed to be a Ukrainian Bayraktar drone, an unmanned system that has been giving hell to Russian vehicles in the weeks gone by. And these latest images of Russian Onyx supersonic cruise missile being launched at Ukrainian targets in the eastern part of the country. The de-escalation by Russia in the central and western parts of Ukraine are being matched with corresponding escalation in the southern and eastern parts of the country, borne out by an unending stream of footage of the targeted attacks.
The domination of eastern Ukraine will require sustained escalation in this part of the country. And that's what we are witnessing as we travel through the Donbas region.
The Russian forces are regrouping with attacks from land and from sea. The southern part has become the prime target in the second phase of war.
In the airspace above Ukraine, Russia continues to be challenged formidably by Ukraine's weapons. This is a Russian Su-35 air superiority fighter that was shot down using NATO weaponry earlier this week. The pilot now in Ukrainian captivity. But could Russia be planning to deploy its stealth fighter, the Su-57, to conduct strike missions in Ukraine? The Su-57 is the 5th generation fighter built to remain barely visible to radar and other sensors, and could trump Ukraine's air defenses, or at least make life more difficult for them. A citizen's video in the early days of the war was believed to be Su-57 on a test bombing mission over the city of Zhytomyr, west of Kyiv, though this advanced aircraft type definitely hasn't been deployed in any real numbers. With Putin narrowing his attacks to the southern and eastern parts of Ukraine, the strength of Russia's military could become more concentrated. With thousands of square kilometers of Ukraine already laid to waste, could what come next be Putin's most decisive escalation? With Mausami Singh in southern Ukraine and Geeta Mohan in eastern Ukraine, Bureau Report, India Today.
Let's also focus on what's been happening in Bucha. Days after the first lot of civilian bodies were found in the city, Ukrainian forces are continuing to find more. In the 5 days since Ukraine actually reclaimed Bucha, the death of more than 300 civilians has been confirmed. Gaurav Sawant was the first Indian journalist to actually report from Ground Zero, to report from Bucha. He's now returned to the Kyiv suburb. The West is accusing Russia of war crimes in Bucha. Moscow, in turn, has refuted all of this, saying that this entire massacre has been staged by Ukraine.
Pope Francis kissed a battered Ukraine flag brought from Bucha to drive home the shock and agony of the world at the mass killings in this little town on the outskirts of Kyiv.
After World War II, an attempt was made to lay the foundations for a new history of peace. But unfortunately, we are not learning. The old story of competing great powers has continued, and in the current war in Ukraine, we are witnessing the impotence of United Nations.
Even as Bucha coped with the brutality unleashed on its people, more bodies surfaced as special forces of the Ukrainian army sanitized every lane of the suburban city.
There is some activity that is going on there. There is some suspect that seems to have been spotted. That area, there are Ukraine army personnel who are deployed here. We've been asked to stay back as these personnel keep an eye on activities that are going on in Bucha. Remember, Bucha is being sanitized. Every lane of Bucha is currently being sanitized. This is the heart of Bucha, and the special forces are here, and they're clearing this area. They're clearing every area right now, going from lane to lane, clearing areas. There was some suspicious activity that was noticed, and that is why they're sanitizing this area before they leave. Now, everyone who's got here, their background is checked, and only once their antecedents have been verified are they cleared to move forward, or they're detained. In Bucha, it is still feared that there are some pockets where there could be either some spies, soldiers or fighters who could still be hiding, and that is why this clearance operation is currently underway.
Ukraine claims more than 300 civilians were brutally killed in Bucha by Russian forces. Moscow claims its army had no hand in the killings, as Russian troops had left Bucha days before the bodies were found.
What's extremely significant is President Zelenskyy of Ukraine has sought international assistance to carry out an independent investigation. Forensic investigators have been sought from several countries to come to Bucha and gather information and intelligence and evidence against Russia for alleged war crimes. According to the government in Ukraine, it's the 64th Motorized Division that had its brigades here in Bucha, and international investigations are actually going door to door. One, gathering information in terms of evidence that people may want to give, also video evidence, and two, when postmortems are carried out, evidence is being gathered of crimes against women, crimes against innocents in terms of their hands being tied behind their backs before they were shot dead. All of that evidence is being gathered, and teams of doctors are also going to help people. For example, this is the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, that's also going to provide medicines and other assistance that people may require. In Bucha, on day 42 of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, with cameraman Lalit Mohan Joshi, Gaurav Sawant for India Today.
Now, the United States, the Justice Department in the country has announced fresh set of sanctions against Russian President Vladimir Putin and his cronies. Russian banks, financial institutions are once again the target. These new set of sanctions are bound to also cripple the Russian economy. Interestingly, this time, the United States has also targeted Putin's daughters.
The US is now hitting Putin where it hurts most. An economic squeeze on his family through sanctions on his daughters Maria and Katrina is the latest American move to punish the Russian president.
Our message to those who continue to enable the Russian regime through their criminal conduct is this: it does not matter how far you sail your yacht. It does not matter how well you conceal your assets. It does not matter how cleverly you write your malware or hide your online activity. The Justice Department will use every available tool to find you, disrupt your plots, and hold you accountable.
Putin's family lives far away from the limelight, maintaining a very low, almost secretive lifestyle. The US believes that a lot of Putin's wealth is hidden among his family members and oligarch friends.
As Russia and its aggression continues, we have our eyes on every yacht and jet. We have our eyes on every piece of art and real estate purchased with dirty money, and on every Bitcoin wallet filled with proceeds of theft and other crimes. Together with our partners around the world, our goal is to ensure that sanctioned Russian oligarchs and cybercriminals will not find safe haven.
The new set of sanctions by the US also target the wife and daughter of Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Not only the US, UK has announced further sanctions against 8 oligarchs and the Russian banks in which their money is stashed. What's very clear is that the call for sanctions are getting personally close to Putin. Bureau Report, India Today.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine has interestingly led to President Zelensky's approval ratings getting tripled, reaching a whopping 90% as compared to 21% actually before the Ukrainian war. Despite facing major challenges in the past to remain in power, Zelensky's image has taken a whole new makeover as the poster child of Ukrainian patriotism and the Ukrainian fight back against Russia.
The war in Ukraine has entered phase 2, and one would wonder if there is any hope left for Ukraine at this point. Well, it appears the world has shown immense faith in Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Yes, the war has catapulted Zelensky's approval ratings to a whopping 90%, as opposed to the 21% before the Russian invasion began. Ratings prior to the war showed how Ukraine was never so confident about the comedian-turned-president. In fact, during his presidential campaign, Zelenskyy had received a healthy 73% in support. But all that hype evaporated quickly. Ukrainian citizens were looking for change, which is why they voted out incumbent President Petro Poroshenko. Volodymyr Zelenskyy was fresh and a new alternative to the old elites. His unconventional image worked in his favor, winning him the presidency. But Zelensky's hype nosedived by 2020 and his approval ratings suffered a scathing dip. In 2021, his approval ratings dropped to 24.7%. People's trust in him fell because around the time Pandora Papers revealed that Zelenskyy was amongst those world leaders who held offshore companies. This was in direct contrast with his anti-establishment and anti-corruption crusader image. However, Zelenskyy tried justifying himself, claiming those companies were established only to defend his businesses in Ukraine. Besides, there were several election promises that Zelenskyy failed to deliver. Zelenskyy was also widely criticized for deepening his alliance with the far-right neo-Nazi forces in Ukraine, especially when news broke out of his involvement with convicted criminal Serhiy Stanenko and how Zelenskyy tried to crown him as chief of Ukraine's security service. But now that's a tale of the past. Zelenskyy has got a whole new image makeover. He's now viewed as a glorious, brave and a gallant president of the embattled country. He risked his life staying in Ukraine, survived assassination attempts and has been consolidating support for Ukraine, staying on the front lines day on day. Zelenskyy now is truly the poster child of Ukrainian patriotism, trying to fend off the Russian invasion. Bureau Report, India Today.
Now, India continues to forge its own diplomatic path amid Cold War 2.0. Foreign Minister Jaishankar, speaking in Parliament yesterday, set the record straight as far as India's stand is concerned, declaring that we've chosen to be on the side of peace and that we'll put our own interests as well as the well-being of our own population first. This is a new, fearless India that's rising on the diplomatic front.
As the Ukraine war rumbles on destructively, one of Russia's oldest allies, India, has been on constant geopolitical spotlight. Why is India going soft on Putin's invasion? Is India alleviating the impact of Western sanctions on Moscow? Why is India still buying Russian oil and weapons? Has India aligned itself in a deeply polarized world since Putin's tanks rolled into Ukraine? The answers to all these questions came when External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar put the record straight in Parliament, stating that a fearless India is charting its own course in global diplomacy.
If India has chosen a side, it is the side of peace.
Hours ago, Jaishankar had spoken to his US counterpart, Antony Blinken. In the backdrop of increasing disquiet in the West over India's indications to buy larger volumes of discounted crude oil from Russia, soon after a dire warning from the White House against buying oil or weapons from Putin. But India's message was unmistakable.
We don't believe it's in India's interest to accelerate or increase imports of Russian energy and other commodities. Right now, just to give everybody the full scope of it, India's imports of Russian energy represent only 1% to 2% of their total energy imports. So while he explained both the mechanisms of our sanctions and reiterated that any country or entity should be abiding by those, we also made clear that we'd be happy to be a partner in reducing their reliance or even their small percentage of reliance on that.
Like all countries, we too are assessing the implications and deciding what is best for our national interest. Members are aware that in a complex and globalized world, every nation takes into account the reality of interdependence. Therefore, even as they express their position in words and deeds, they also adopt policies that safeguard the well-being of their population.
It began with US Deputy National Security Advisor Dalip Singh, who made the seemingly callous, intemperate remark, lecturing India on how Russia would not step in if China escalated operations at the border. A remark that has been widely derided, including by India's former ambassador to the UN, who labelled it as coercion.
What we are seeking to do, whether it is in the context of India or other partners and allies around the world, is to do all we can to see to it that the international community is speaking in unison, speaking loudly against this unjustified, unprovoked, premeditated aggression, calling for an end to the violence.
India, as you are aware, has always been in favor of resolving differences and disputes through dialogue and diplomacy. In our meeting today, we will have an opportunity to discuss contemporary issues and concerns in some detail.
India repeatedly putting its national interest as sacrosanct, refusing to get drawn into a damaging Cold War of superpowers, turning the proverbial page in global diplomacy. Bureau Report, India Today.